Hello, dear listeners. You're turning into the Innovative Spain IT Chronicles podcast. Thank you for listening us. And my name is Zhenya. It's easier. And I invite you to dive into the world of IT in Spain. So, as you know, in each episode, we discuss the latest trends in industry and invite special guests. Today, we have an incredible guest, Joe. Welcome on the podcast, Joe Haslam.
Thank you very much. Thank you for calling me incredible.
Joe is not just a guest. Joe is professor, and he spent more than dozen of years in EA Business School. It's one of the best universities in Europe, if not the best. So today we will discuss with Joe not only IT trends, but also we'll cover a bit education and also how great to live in Madrid. Joe, let's start with you. Our traditional question is actually, of course, an overview of IT in Spain, but let's start with yourself. Just bring some light to the picture, who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I've lived in Spain now for over 20 years. I grew up in Ireland. I grew up in the south of Ireland, very far from the capital city of Dublin. And I guess my first job was like a lot of people in consulting and banking. I went to London and then I went to the States and like a lot of Irish people, we went around. And then consulting, one of the things the .com thing was taking off. And of course, they were asking all the consultants to try and explain that to them. And we did a business plan and the company didn't go for it, so we decided to leave and do it ourselves. So 6 of us left and we started this company called Marrakesh, which was an e-procurement company, and we raised I guess in the end it was about $75 million and scaled to 250 people. So that was a hell of a ride, kind of 4 years, no holidays kind of stuff. And then after that I came, I guess after the company was sold, I looked at what to do, so I decided to come to Madrid. Ireland and Spain have always had lots of links. The history of Ireland is sending messages to Spain to come and save us from the English. So we've like 400 years of that. So I always wanted to come here. I looked at IE Business School, and I guess I looked at the rankings like a lot of people, and I liked the fact that it had a speciality for entrepreneurship. I thought that was what I wanted to do. So I came here to do an MBA, and very quickly I was sort of asking like why you don't have courses on scale up, which is my area, because that's where I had that's what my experience was, which was to scale up companies to 250 people. So they kind of said, well, we don't really have anyone to teach that. Why don't you do it? And that was sort of where that happened. And I started slowly at first, 1 or 2 courses, but it turns out that scale up is actually the most interesting part of entrepreneurship. Anyone can start a company. That's just filling out a form. The interesting part is, can you scale it? I guess particularly in the exponential age, which is what we're in, where you have like large companies. Sam Altman in OpenAI talks about that there will be $1 billion company with 1 employee, and so that was very much the focus on. So I now teach scale up classes in IE to everyone, to university, to masters, to MBAs, and to executive MBAs. I probably spend, in theory, I guess I spend half my time, but in reality, it's probably much more. And then I also do a lot of the usual things, which is to talk to companies about how to make their employees more entrepreneurship, talk to governments about how to make their country more entrepreneurial. And I think it's very important as a business school that you go out and you visit. So last year I would have been to China, to India, and just back from Korea, lots of places like that. So I would spend maybe 15 weeks a year traveling and meeting ecosystems. So and it's been a long time now. It's been nearly 15 years of teaching. So 500 students, 15 years. My LinkedIn is pretty full, and I find it really interesting because the average age of a company founder is 45. It's not a young person's game. So I have a lot of people who perhaps when they were 30 and did an MBA and now are really getting into entrepreneurship. And I find myself talking to a lot of those people. So that's I guess the summary of what I do.
Yeah, sounds incredible, and also actually from my side, it's an unexpected fact that Ireland and Spain has so tight history, and I just definitely was aware of complicated history of Ireland. A lot of countries with complicated history nowadays, and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but I suppose that this is really incredible experience that you're sharing. You can not only share overview of IT system in Spain, but also you can compare and see like from this perspective as well how Spain, let's say, represented vs rivals. So maybe you can bring some light here as well and just like answer our traditional question
Well,
about overview.
in terms of Spain, I mean, Spain, I always begin by saying it's like the second most visited country in the world. You know, you don't have like most people will have come to Spain. You know, not like the question is whether you leave. And then, of course, Spain is such a varied country. You have islands where people go on holidays. You have Madrid. You have Barcelona, Bilbao. Like it's such a wide kind of a country. And so the issue is always, I guess, where the world has changed a lot. I mean, whether you use the cliche of like, the sun has just come out, so I have to close the blinds.
Yeah, it's
Um,
okay.
that's going to be a problem. So the question about the really interesting that's happening right now is that you see people coming to Spain who have no connection with Spain. You know, they literally just do the analysis and think, okay, I could live anywhere. Where will I live? And so there always used to be people who would come here maybe because they met somebody from Spain or something like that. But now, particularly people from the US who are very, very kind of career oriented, very kind of analytical in terms of their decision making. Irish people, we would, okay, Spain, that sounds good, let's go. Whereas Americans would like, check the tax laws and all that kind of stuff. So what we're seeing now, the most amazing people live here, and also we're getting people from Latin America. I mean, it's quite interesting. You go on LinkedIn and everyone pretends to live in Buenos Aires, but most of you people who are actually saying that are living here. So a lot of the Latin American unicorns are here. So you have those people. Then you have even a lot of people from Eastern Europe. I guess you have Eastern Europe is nice, but the weather isn't great and that kind of thing, and things can be quite slow moving as well. So people are like yourself are attracted to come here. So Spain is very much, and it's not a story in terms of it's very much an underground story, and that's more true in Barcelona than it is in Madrid. So you have lots of people who live in Barcelona, but they've really no connection with Barcelona other than that they live there. They're not there to learn the language. They're not really there to participate. It's just a nice place to live, and they're connected to the internet. So Madrid, people who come to Madrid are a bit different. They tend to integrate a bit more, because it's easier to do that. So that's kind of where we are now with Spain, which is that it's in a moment that there are lots of people who have just decided to come here, and has all of the things that you need in terms of like it's a very safe country. I mean, that's the first thing that people from Latin America say, that you can go to a party, get completely drunk, and like walk home, and basically you wouldn't be able to do that in most countries. And it's a Euro area country. It's under the European Court of Justice. And the other thing is that you have a generation of entrepreneurs who are now gone into venture capital. So Sami Paya, Kibo, K-Fund, all of these are funded by entrepreneurs. And that wasn't the case previously. You had bankers who were terrible people to get money from, because they think it's their money. Whereas that's been really exciting to see actual people who have started companies and therefore understand the needs of entrepreneurs. And the Spanish governments are also funding it through what's called the Fundico. They've given billions and billions of euros to fund not just seed but also Series A and even Series B. So it's a sort of a very exciting thing. I mean, we'll probably get into the whole notion of how is it different to Silicon Valley. But Spain has come a long way in the last 20 years since I've been here. It needs to probably get into a different phase now, but I'm very positive about everything to do with Spain. I'm not planning on going anywhere.
That sounds really exciting, actually, and I can support, I suppose, 90% of your points for sure. Because let's say, given that I'm originally from Russia, most of my mates who left the country chose between Portugal and Spain, and most of them chose Spain because of a lot of factors. But also, I suppose it's not very obvious that in Spain there is a big focus on the life. And for example, for me, I'm a very career oriented person, more like in Moscow, for example, it's more American style of culture and living, and I'm learning every day how to live. I mean, like from Madrilenians. You gave like a background around the, let's say, general picture, but if we're talking about startups and current landscape, from your point of view, why don't we have in Spain so many unicorns?
Well, I mean, we have some, but there are Cabify, Idealista. There are lots of reasons that we don't have any. And it's sort of like, in many ways, it's the wrong question. Like you have to have, before you can have unicorns, whatever, you have to have gazelles, right? Which are the animal. And I think we need to talk much more about unicorns. I mean, I every time I go to the US, they always say, like, why is the US men's soccer team so bad? What can they do to make themselves better? It's the same question in reverse. And they say, why, what can the US learn from Spain to be good at football? And then you have the opposite way. What can Spain learn from the US? But Spain is not like, it's whatever, the 12th richest country in the world. It has large banks, it has large energy companies, it has many large things. It even has like fashion companies, it has whatever, 3 of the top 10 restaurants in the world. Like Spain, to sort of like put focus on the unicorns, which people do, the first person is kind of wrong. It's why doesn't Spain have a Messi? Why doesn't Spain have a Ronaldo? These kind of things are exceptional sort of things that come out. Spain has it has a generation. You have to think how, when I came here 20 years ago, I mean, the levels of English were really poor. They were still people running the country were still people who were born before democracy had arrived. And it's unfair to sort of expect that you can go so dramatically from that situation to a situation. I mean, without getting too political, it's very hard to have you must have political freedom before you can have economic freedom. And that's a sort of, just thinking who won the Nobel Prize for economics yesterday, that's a big discussion as to where these things come from. And my wife was born in the pre-democratic era. If I was born in Spain, I would have been born in the pre-democratic era as well. So that takes a while to work out. And I think the people who've started unicorns tend to be people who've either worked or were educated in the US. And that's where you get it. Like you say, like, in order to be it, you have to see it. And if you grow up around people, I lived in Silicon Valley as well, and you see people going in raising 50 million. If you're drinking coffee with someone who raises 50 million Series A, and then you will go raise 50 million Series A, because that's the point. So I think Spain, those are the kind of issues that I think that the generation coming has grown up really on the internet, has access to podcasts, has access to Silicon Valley thinking without necessarily being in thinking. And I think also that there's an element of the kind of companies that have become unicorns are not really playing to Spain's traditional strengths, like things in engineering. And so, I mean, there's the other thing that I say is that you look who built Facebook. I mean, Facebook was really built. People look at Sheryl and Mark Zuckerberg, but Javi Olan, who's the head of the chief growth officer, is a Spanish guy from Huelva, and Joaquin built all of the artificial intelligence engine behind it. So it's an interesting kind of a question that you look behind the scenes of a lot of Silicon Valley companies, and you find people from Spain, and but they're not around that kind of someone like Zuckerberg or Sam Altman or even Bill Gates. These guys are just incredibly intense and incredibly focused on, like, the famous line of what's cool, a million isn't cool, a billion is cool. And just having that kind of mentality, you don't have it around. I mean, you say to someone in Silicon Valley, how do you feel about running a 500 person company? And they're like, cool, yeah, no problem, whatever, you know. Spain is still, oh my God, that's a lot of people. You know, I have to pay 500 people at the end of the month. So there are lots of things, but I prefer to focus on what, you know, what's been happening. And there's absolutely possible to build something from Spain in the same way it's possible to build something from. It's curious that the unicorns tend to come from the Netherlands, you know, Adyen and Booking and ASML and these kind of companies. So maybe we need to, in the same way that Johan Cruyff kind of changed football in Spain, and you know, we need probably a Dutch person to come over and to make Spain get very focused on building unicorns. So that's maybe something we need to happen.
Yeah, let's say that for me, if the country can play football so great, for sure there should be place for unicorns as well.
Mm-hmm.
But what you was talking about strengths of Spain, like traditional, some pillars like engineering, like construction, I suppose, also.
Yeah.
Banks and real estate as well, and tourism. So, given, let's say, these strengths, what do you think about how IT can be connected to this? Like, what do you see from your point of view, perspective?
Well, Spain does have an engineering tradition. You know, Spanish engineers have. In the US, people are proud if their children become lawyers or doctors. In Spain, they're proud if their children become engineers. And, you know, you only have to see the infrastructure everywhere you go, everything from the metro and tunnels and roads. And Spain is a building kind of a country. And 4 huge construction companies, so they build dams. I mean, if you go to Valencia, like they basically diverted the river, you know. So that's never an issue. From an IT sense, I'm not so, like, I don't really think of IT as a category anymore. I mean, IT is sort of everywhere. It's and Spain does have connectivity and things like that. Like the you can complain about sort of connectivity in rural places. There are certain countries where in rural places the internet just doesn't go, and Spain doesn't have that issue. So I guess a wider question would be, are young, ambitious people going into IT? And I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, you have other countries are much more obsessed about celebrities and, you know, those kind of becoming famous and famous for being famous and kind of thing. I don't see that among Spanish young people. I think a lot of Spanish young people are still quite serious about what they do, and are anxious to kind of become knowledgeable and become experts in technical areas. It isn't that sort of thing that you see where people want to become famous for kind of doing nothing. So I do think there's still, I mean, other people will argue about dropout rates and other aspects of Spanish youth, but I think a lot of people are still very interested in Spain in technology, and I think that they're very interested in you know, working for technology companies and being part of the technological revolution.
I suppose that it is not a separate category from my perspective, given that I'm product manager. But I see that it's interesting the rate of penetration, and of course there are some conservative industries which are a bit flexible, adaptive for IT innovations. And my question was more related to the level of penetration and what barriers do you see, like from your general industries, where you see, for example, in what direction most of startups can be built on.
Sure.
Like,
Well, there is a hacker culture in Spain. There has always been. There are like things like meetups, and again, you and they're not just in Madrid or Barcelona. You even have down in Malaga and Bilbao. There is a sort of a hacker culture, and people kind of find each other in a way that Spain is quite a kind of it's kind of a flat, democratized country. It doesn't have other countries have kind of circles that you can't penetrate. I don't find that in Spain. I find that people who have common interests can kind of find each other, and like France has a much more of a to try and break into certain circles. You need to have gone to certain schools or things like that. I don't see that in Spain. Where can we build companies? I mean, those it tends to be there's a real kind of a deep tech movement, which is to sort of to say that we need to start doing things in defense, obviously, but also in you're just moving away from kind of like photo sharing apps and things like that. So it's cybersecurity. A lot of the unicorns or the gazelles, at least, are like back office accounting systems. Those kind of like very uninteresting companies, and they've done Belvo and Factorial and these companies. They're all kind of doing very uninteresting things. Those will be continue to be where Spain builds its companies. But there's also there's a rocket company, PLD Space in Teruel, or building rockets to go to low Earth orbit. So Spain is a large country. It's got a lot of people. It does have free education system, infrastructure, rule of law, all of these things, and also the ability to find people. So I don't know. Is it tend to, again, to focus on all of the positives? There's a professor that I always talk about, a guy in Stanford, a guy called BJ Fogg, who talks about why people go on to create great companies. And he always talks about that there has to be a trigger moment in their lives, and that you meet somebody or something happen. And I think Spain needs more trigger moments, and those trigger moments lead on to great things. So that is where I think we are. But I wouldn't rule out, I mean, there's a crypto scene, like everything is going on here. And even if it isn't, there's at least one person doing everything. So it's whether it's cyber or crypto or IoT or anything. There's people doing everything you would want to find. And it's, when you speak to somebody, I was speaking to somebody recently from Romania. She was saying, like, it's really, there are certain areas where there's no money and no one working in this area, and that's why she had to come here. And here she said she found the people she needed to speak to in a week. So that's just an example of what we need to be positive about.
I really admire this, and I suppose that this is one of the strengths of Spain in these connections and the open culture. And also, I know that you've been an advisor from the beginning in Madrid startup scene. So Summer Summit is, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the South Summit. I mean, that was always an interesting thing that we wanted to do, and because of, like, Spain is full of organizing, because it's a country that people come and visit. There's a great tradition of hospitality. So there's event spaces, hotels, flights. You can fly everywhere. So it makes sense to have a conference in Madrid. I mean, the greatest respect to the Web Summit in Portugal. It's a harder place to get to. It's a harder place to stay. Even the arena is not purpose built. Spain has all of those things. So it makes a lot of sense to have to organize South Summit. I think we internally are quite surprised how much it's grown. I mean, we now have one in Brazil and we now have one in Korea. So that's basically, it's incredible what a very small team are able to do. They've been working with each other for, maybe, I think it's 12 years now. But to hold a South Summit Madrid, a South Summit in Porto Alegre in Brazil, and now recently South Summit in Korea. And we previously had South Summits in Colombia and in Mexico. So I think that's that's a pretty, it's a fantastic thing to be able to do. And I think, as you say, to get inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs, they when they get to hear people and see people, it helps them kind of pushes them a bit farther, that they might kind of seek to do it themselves. So yeah, South Summit has been and it continues to be a very important part of entrepreneurship. I tell everyone, put it in your diary. I think it's the 5th to the 7th of June. And clear out your diary and just become part of the whole event.
What benefits do you see in this event, for example, for student, for the guy who works in professional services like consultant and wants to start something? Like what I know that.
Well, like events are, I have a saying that I say in class, that the world will only meet you halfway. So, the events, you just buying a ticket gets you nothing. You have to try and do the hard work. And who's coming? Where do I meet them? Everyone has a way of, everyone has a kind of a need, and you find out who's coming, and everything up to, you find out where they're staying, when they're arriving, when they're going. See, can you show them around Madrid? Then you need to kind of like identify who's speaking, and then you have to try and get a meeting with them, and if possible get it in their diary. A lot of people have like PAs and things like that. So yeah, I mean, that there's a whole science to making an event to be successful. And also, just the other thing which I think I'm good at, but not everyone is, like, be the last to leave every party. Some people kind of go over and talk to that Russian guy in the corner. Like, that's, a lot of people don't. They just kind of go and they look around and see people in the distance. And you have to walk up to people and you say, hi, I'm Zhenya, and this is what I do, and who are you, and what do you do? That's really important. So that's the benefit of it, and that's the way the world works. That you have to go and do that. You can't just have a stand and hope people come by. You have to actually have a plan. And I see that a lot of. And then there's also like getting into the parties, getting into all the VC dinners. That's a plan as well. Like, sometimes the event is really just the sideshow. The important thing is that someone's having a dinner the night before. How do you get into that? Or someone's having sort of a trip to somewhere, and how do you get into that? So you have to be proactive about. There's a whole skill and science to maximizing your events. Plus, you have to have your pitch very clear. This is my company. This is, what are you looking for? Are you looking for money? Are you looking for talent? Are you looking, what are you looking for? So a lot of people say it's like, hi, I've got a startup. But no, you have to be more clear in terms of, this person, can you introduce me to this person? Or we're closing around, we have 50% committed, this is the valuation, or something like that. Or, I'd love to talk to you, we're not raising, but we will be in 3 months. Yeah, and just thinking about it now, it's actually very useful that we've come onto this topic, because it's the differences between, sometimes I think, what value do I have to give early startups? And this is a classic example of how guys like me who've been doing this for a long time, and we remember like the old days of having to go to events. You had to do so much preparation because you didn't have apps, and you were like, literally like, can you get me a printed list of the people at the and it's funny how we've made it easier now to meet people, but somehow other people don't do the work. So we should probably have an entire podcast on how to
Exactly.
maximize events.
Yes, events, and I suppose that this is also, I see a lot of events actually in Madrid, and I'm really happy to be part of it. The thing is that I have actually two questions. I can't choose which one I want to start with. Let's start with science. How did you started to learn this? Like, how you built your own? I would say that this is like networking muscle, or something like this.
Well, there's sort of two things. I mean, a lot of it is coming from Ireland, where we're a small country. Like the Lebanese, the Israelis, people from small countries have a different attitude to networking. We have to be the person to organize the event. We have to be the person to buy the drinks. We have to be the person to do all of these things. And it becomes naturally because it's what you grow up with. We're not like a big power that everything will come to them. We have to be the people who do things. And making yourself useful is a skill in itself. That's people often ask me, what do I do? And I always say, like, I just find ways to make myself useful. Like, you proactively connect people who you think should meet. You're like, hey guy, you should meet, and then you go ahead and do it. Or you go to people and you say, listen, like, if you have a problem, you can contact me. Just being helpful and things like that. So I do think it's just the way Ireland that's the way we are. It doesn't become a surprise. The other thing, I guess, is that when you come to another country, it's both an advantage and a disadvantage. It's an advantage in that people will remember you because you're different, but it's a disadvantage, obviously, in terms of things like the language and those areas. But I think that when you meet people, you have to. I have a good friend of mine who's a professor who has just joined IE Business School, and I told to him, I said, don't wait for the question. I said, like, tell them when you meet them, this is who you are, this is where you come from, this is how long you've lived in Spain, and this is what you're interested in. And that helps people immediately understand who they are, and they're listening for those questions. I always sort of add that I'm married and I have two daughters, and that makes you sort of seem more settled. Because people don't invest in people they think are going to leave. They think that you're going to get bored with Spain and you're going to leave or something, and they don't invest time in you. And then the other thing, of course, is accept every invite that you can. One of the things that I find really funny in Spain is that, like, people think they never want to accept an invitation at short notice because it in case people think they're not busy. It's like it's a sort of a double thing. I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, if you call me yesterday and ask me, can we meet tomorrow? If it's free in the diary, I will say yes, always. But in Spain, the mentality is, never agree because you don't want anyone to think that you're not busy. And there are lots of those kind of things mean that there's advantages for people like me, because people will know that that you'll help them if you can, as opposed to this other notion. So I think that is a thing perhaps that Spain needs to work on a lot, which is this whole kind of hierarchical formality, those sort of issues. I've never really. Someone could call me and can I see you tomorrow? And if it's available, I'll do it. If I'm not here, then I say I can't. But saying yes to things, there seems to be an attitude that you project your power by saying no to things, and I think, okay, maybe, but I say yes to everything I possibly can. And I think that compounds over time.
Yeah, I also noticed not exactly this thing, but a lot of Spain is my fifth country where I'm living, and I noticed, like, some things that hidden from the scene and in the shadows, but they influence a lot. So,
yeah, that's very true. It's funny. I have that as well, which is to say that even though I have a lot of people who are not very visible, and you get to know them because I have this thing about, like, when you meet people in different situations, then they start to think you're valuable. So you might meet them at, like, you're invited to a dinner, or then you're invited to a conference, and then, like, you're at a wedding, and then you're at, like, a lunch or something, and they see you in like sort of 5 different places, and then they kind of think this guy is sort of valuable. But I've never really rated this whole, some people try to work behind the scenes. I understand why historically that seems to be the image people like for themselves, but that's not my image. I always want to be on stage. I'm not these people who like to move quietly behind the scenes.
Yeah, I was talking more about like some traditions or some mentality that influence, for example, your work or let's say your representation on the scene, because you need to know some things, how to contact people in various countries. Like in Spain, you need to understand that there could be no just because you send an invitation today for tomorrow.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I think there is a thing. Maybe this like we have to have a future podcast on how to network at events, but also
Exactly.
how to convince people to do something, moving into action. There's a thing in Spain that people always say no first time, like always, and you just have to understand that nobody ever wants to kind of admit that they said yes first time. So they will always, almost always, say no. So I have a piece of advice, which is get the first no over with as quickly as possible. So you ask somebody to do something, they will say no because they don't want to show that they're easy. And you just accept that. And then having said no, they're more likely the second time to say yes because they've said no at least once. And it's kind of crazy, but that seems to be the way it works. So you just let people say no, and then go back to them, a few weeks later, and higher if they've said no once, there's a higher chance they'll say yes the second time.
I can confirm this 100%. This works for sure in all authority services and libraries and all that kind of stuff.
The other thing
Yeah,
is,
first, no, you ask 3-4 times, por favor,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it happens.
Yeah, the other thing is good humor, which is to say that they say that in America what succeeds is aggression. In France, what succeeds is elegance, and in Spain, what succeeds is humor. Like you won't get anywhere with anyone by being kind of like angry. You have to like if anything you want to do, a table in a restaurant, an appointment to get a driver's license, whatever it is, like in Spain, make people laugh. If you make people laugh, you'll get anything. Spain, in some ways, you sometimes see very serious people, but then I never really understood this in the workplace. You have people who are like, they say you have to be serious. And then you meet them in another circumstance. Either you go play football with them or you go for dinner with them, and they're just this different person. Yeah, they're really funny, but they project this kind of, you have to be really serious to be important. And they kind of project that. But look, whatever in Spain, make people laugh and you'll get anything. And there's fantastic comedians in this country. They're really good TV shows, really funny. So that's my advice with the Spanish person, which is to say, never, if you be angry with them, you won't get anywhere. You need to try and make them laugh and sort of like talk about the absurdities of life, and then maybe they'll help you. So there's a tip there.
Because we have 2 more topics for the 2 podcasts, I suppose. Before we call it a day, I would like to ask you to share like maybe 3 tips more. You shared several ones already for young entrepreneurs in IT in Spain, like that you can share from your, let's say, perspective.
Sure. I think the first thing is that literally, this is my job as a professor now, is just to help people make good decisions. I mean, it's not so much to transfer information. So I sort of have like companies want 3 things always, which is to say critical thinking, communication, and working in teams. So the first thing is this idea of just how to communicate. When you meet somebody, say, "Hi, I'm Joe. I'm from Ireland. I live here for 20 years, and I work as a scale-up professor at IE Business School." Just say that. Say your name, say where you're from, what you're doing, those kind of things. And then when you meet them again, remind them and say, "Hey, hi, do you remember I met you at South Summit? And it's good to see you again." I mean, it's don't expect people to try and remember you, especially as you get older. When you get to my age, I have 500 students. You can't remember everyone, right? So that's the kind of first thing, which is to sort of help people introduce yourself in a good way, and then also tell people where you met them before. The second thing is work on your strengths, not your weaknesses, which is to say that many educational systems, they focus on weaknesses. If you're not good at maths, just forget about it. Be even better at the thing you're good at, and because it's really hard to get good at something that you're sort of instinctively not good at. So find out whatever it is, and also you need to have an identity. Like, I have an identity as the scale up professor. Like, there's people who telephone business school and literally say, like, there's what's the name of that scale up professor? So really, I heard him speak at a conference, and the people who answer the phones know that it's me at this stage. So you have to have an identity. So you're IT guy in Spain or whatever. Think about your brand. Think about what people identify around you, and I send out a message that says, like, talk to me about scale ups. I want to talk about scale up. If you're going to tell me about, I used to work for this Romanian scale up, or I used to work for this Armenian scale up, like, that's really, then I will want to talk with you. So you have to kind of like send that message. So introducing yourself and giving some background, and then also having an identity. Oh, he's the cybersecurity guy, or he's the whatever guy. That's a super important thing that you need to have. So those would be those would be like the two things that I try and work on with my students. And I guess the final thing, because there always has to be three things, right?
Of course, from consulting business.
Never just 1, 2, 3. I think people underestimate their value. So you might look at me, and I've started 6 companies and I've done a lot of things in life, but you might think, like, what value do you have for someone like me? And I always say to students, 20-year-old master students, I say, listen, there's so much that I don't know about you that you know about your generation. What shoes you wear, what bank accounts you use, what foods you like to eat, where you like to go on holidays. All of these attitudes are super valuable. It's a sort of a strange thing that when I'm asked to go speak to banks or large companies, they're really they're very poorly understood about what younger generations want. And that because, I mean, even I was talking to someone about Twitch the other day, someone who works, and they had no idea what it is or anything like it. And the idea of where people get their news from, all those kind of things. And so young people are, whether your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, there's always things that people from a different generation won't know because they're not from that generation. So you have extremely valuable information. I mean, companies pay me money to explain to them what 20-year-old people think, because they can't get that information anywhere else. So I get it obviously from the people in my class. So I literally do presentations saying, like, this is what my class think. They're concerned about this. They're this is important to them, and this is not. So don't think, like, just because you're someone who has just graduated and has very little work experience, that you don't have value. You make choices every day about the products you consume, and your choices are probably very similar to other people of your generation, and companies are desperate to know. Starbucks wants to know what coffee 20-year-old people are drinking. They desperately want to know that. So always believe that you have value.
I can't agree more on that. And it's really a pleasure to have you today with us on our podcast. Listeners, please don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for new episodes as well. Joe, many thanks for your time, and it was a pleasure and very interesting for me as well.
Thanks for the invite, and thanks for taking the initiative. This is they use the technology and get it out there, and that's, many people talk about things and don't do them. So, but you're someone who doesn't just talk about things, but you do them as well. So very happy to speak with you this morning.
Igualmente.